Listen carefully. This isn't just another channel. This is a weapon. Every video here is built to slap the weakness out of you and inject raw power into your mind. If you came for comfort, leave. But if you came for the truth, the kind that burns, the kind that breaks illusions, the kind that flips your mindset into steel, then hit that subscribe button right now. Don't just watch. Commit. Join the ones who refuse to stay average. Legends move in silence, but they start here. Subscribe and prove you're not like the rest. Well. They thought they were clever, didn't they? They thought unleashing a narcissist against you was some kind of masterstroke. The perfect puppet, the perfect mask, the perfect little weapon. But here's the problem with puppets. They're empty inside, hollow, nothing but strings and noise. They dance for applause, but the second the crowd stops clapping, they collapse. And you stopped clapping. That's when their entire plan started to rot. They wanted you to fight. They wanted you to defend. They wanted you to drown in explanations, because that's how narcissists feed, on your energy, on your outrage, on your desperate need to be understood. But you learned the trick. You didn't give them a stage. You didn't argue. You didn't beg. You didn't bite. You let them dangle. You let them choke on their own performance. And nothing destroys a narcissist faster than silence. See, narcissists survive by illusion. They project confidence, but it's desperation. They project control, but it's chaos. They project superiority, but it's all duct tape and mirrors. The people who sent this puppet after you thought you'd crumble under the act, but you didn't. You saw through it. And the second you see through it, the mask cracks. There's no magic left. There's no fear left. There's no power left. Do you know why they chose a narcissist? Because narcissists look dangerous to the untrained eye. Loud voices, big gestures, smirks that scream, "I've already won." It's all theater. And people love theater. People love drama. But theater isn't war. Theater doesn't last. The stage lights go out, and the actor is just another fragile human. And that's exactly what you made them. Human again. Breakable. Pathetic. Predictable. The real comedy is this. Their entire master plan depended on you reacting. Without your reaction, the narcissist is nothing but a clown screaming at an empty room. That's why it backfired. That's why they lost before the game even began. Because you refused to play. You stood there calm, unbothered, unchained, while their weapons self-destructed in front of everyone. They tried to humiliate you and ended up exposing themselves. They don't understand this part. Every narcissist carries a timer inside. Tick, tick, tick. It only runs when they're ignored. The more you deny them fuel, the faster it ticks. And when it goes off, the mask shatters. The lies collapse. The grand performance turns into a tantrum, and the same crowd that once clapped for them starts looking disgusted. That's what you did. You made them unravel without lifting a finger. Do you realize how dangerous that makes you? Most people can't resist feeding the narcissist. They defend, they argue, they explain, they fight for clarity. They give the puppet what it wants, energy. You didn't. You starved it. You weaponized indifference. And indifference is poison to the ego. You didn't just win. You rewrote the entire script. Look at the irony. The people who sent this puppet after you thought they were playing chess. They thought they had you cornered with their shiny little piece. But they forgot something crucial. The board belongs to the one who doesn't play by their rules. You flipped the table. You didn't protect the king. You burned the board. And when the smoke cleared, all that was left was their puppet choking on its own strings. That's the part they'll never forgive you for. Not that you survived, not that you won, but that you exposed the scam. You made the predator look desperate. You made the god look human. You made the weapon look like a toy. And when the illusion breaks, it never comes back. No one can fear what they've already seen as pathetic. No one can respect what's been revealed as hollow. Here's the lesson. Narcissists are not strong, they're scavengers. They thrive only when you hand them your energy. They're kings of nothing, rulers of smoke, tyrants of empty applause. And when you deny them, when you rip away the spotlight, they vanish, they implode, they cannibalize themselves. That's why the plan failed. That's why the puppet collapsed. That's why the joke is on them. The world wants you to fear narcissists. They want you to see them as untouchable manipulators. But what they don't tell you is that all of it, every ounce of their power, depends on your participation. Stop participating and they disintegrate. Stop defending and they look insane. Stop caring and they shrink into the small, trembling shells they've been hiding all along. You didn't just survive their attack. You dismantled their entire playbook. You turned their weapon against them without swinging once. They wanted humiliation for you, but humiliation came for them. The puppet they chose was hollow, and you made sure everyone saw the emptiness. You turned the spotlight into a mirror, and when they finally looked at themselves, the horror was undeniable. They weren't powerful, they weren't gods, they weren't predators, they were desperate, they were weak, they were exposed. And here's the final twist: the people who sent that narcissist after you, they've lost more than a weapon. They've lost credibility. They've lost the illusion of control. Because once a narcissist collapses publicly, the ones who unleash them are tied to the failure. Their plan doesn't just backfire, it stains them forever. They wanted you destroyed. Instead, they destroyed their own reputation. That's how the game ends. Not with explosions, not with shouting, not with a dramatic fight. It ends in silence. It ends when you refuse to give them the only thing they crave, your energy. That's the Joker's trick. That's the dark art. Not to fight harder, not to scream louder, but to watch them crumble under the weight of their own emptiness. And now, when you walk away, you don't just leave as the survivor. You leave as the one who proved the truth. Their master plan was never a threat. Their puppet was never a predator. Their narcissist was never a god. You ripped the mask away, and all that was left was a hollow man gasping for attention. The joke is over, and you won without saying a word. Let's talk about addiction, not your addiction, theirs. The narcissist lives on attention the way junkies live on needles. They don't breathe air, they breathe reactions. Every flinch, every defense, every long explanation. That's oxygen to them. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're actually feeding the monster. That's why they chase you. That's why they poke. That's why they humiliate. Not because they're strong, but because they're starving. Here's the truth. They don't want you to know. Narcissists don't even care if the attention is positive or negative. Love them, they feed. Hate them, they feed. Argue with them, they feast. What they cannot survive is indifference. They cannot stand silence. When you stop reacting, you starve them. And when you starve them, they lose their shine. They go from predators to pathetic beggars clawing for scraps. Think about it. Why do they escalate every time you ignore them? Why do they push harder when you don't respond? Because the drug is drying up. They're twitching. They're panicking. They'll scream louder, invent bigger lies, pull more dramatic stunts. That's not power. That's withdrawal. That's what silence does. It cuts the supply line straight into their veins. And here's the genius of silence. It doesn't just protect you, it exposes them. When you don't react, their mask starts slipping. People watching from the outside see desperation they were never meant to see. Suddenly, the charming predator looks like a clown. The powerful figure looks like a child throwing a tantrum. They wanted you to look crazy. Instead, their own hunger makes them look insane. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. It doesn't mean you didn't notice. It doesn't mean you're afraid. It means you've learned the game and you refuse to play it. That's the real punchline. They prepared all their lines, all their manipulations, all their gaslighting tricks. But none of it works if you don't engage. They brought weapons to a fight you walked away from, and now they're swinging at thin air. People don't understand this because they confuse attention with respect. They think by confronting, they're showing strength. Wrong. By confronting, you're proving you care. And to a narcissist, that's gold. Your anger is a gift. Your pain is proof they matter. That's why they provoke. That's why they smirk when you explode. They've already won. But when you don't react, that smirk disappears. Their eyes start darting. They don't know what to do with silence. They can't manipulate what doesn't respond. Most people are terrified of silence because it feels empty. But in the hands of someone who understands power, silence isn't empty. It's suffocating. Silence is a mirror. You stand still and suddenly they're forced to see themselves. They see the cracks, the desperation, the emptiness they've been hiding. And that's what they fear most. Not you fighting, not you crying, not you defending. What they fear is being seen without the mask. Let me tell you something that will change the way you deal with them forever. Narcissists only exist if you build the stage. If you give them an audience, they perform. If you walk away, the theater closes. Imagine an actor screaming lines on an empty stage. That's them. Useless, powerless, irrelevant. And here's another twist. Silence doesn't just kill the narcissist, it educates the crowd. Everyone watching learns something. They see who stays calm, who refuses to drop to childish levels, and who keeps screaming like a desperate addict. You don't have to expose them. They expose themselves. Your silence writes the script, and their hunger performs it. The weak man defends himself. The weak woman explains. The strong one says nothing. Because truth doesn't need defense. Strength doesn't need validation. You don't need to argue with a clown to prove you're not one. Just let him juggle alone until the crowd gets bored. That's the trick. That's the Joker's laugh in the dark. Silence isn't passive. Silence is violent in its own way. It crushes illusions without lifting a finger. It slices egos sharper than any insult. It forces the narcissist into a corner where every move looks desperate. They can't charm. They can't manipulate. They can't dominate. All they can do is unravel in front of the same audience they once controlled. And you don't even need to clap. Understand this. Silence is not about running away. It's about refusing to bleed for free. It's about saying, you don't get my energy anymore. That's not escape, that's domination. You've turned their greatest weapon, your reaction, into a dead tool. They can swing it all they want. It's useless. What's even darker, silence makes them reveal their truth faster. When you stop giving them fuel, they panic and burn through their mask. Lies get bigger. Rage gets louder. The performance gets sloppy. They start talking too much. They start tripping over their own words. They try to control everyone at once, and in doing so, they lose control completely. That's the collapse. That's the backfire. And when that moment comes, don't gloat. Don't announce victory. Don't even smirk. Stay quiet. Stay dangerous. Let them choke on the silence they once mocked. Because nothing cuts deeper than realizing the person you tried to destroy doesn't even acknowledge your existence. That's the real poison, not insults, not comebacks, not revenge, just silence. The one thing they cannot handle, the one thing they cannot survive. Because without attention, they are nothing, and they know it. So the next time they circle around you, the next time they poke, the next time they try to bait you into defending yourself, laugh inside. Let them flail, let them scream, let them unravel, and give them nothing, not anger, not defense, not reaction, just silence. Because silence is not absence. Silence is power. Silence is the noose they tie around their own neck. Let's talk about their favorite tricks, the dirty little toys they keep in their pocket. Gaslighting, guilt tripping, mind games so predictable, so boring, yet so effective on the weak. This is the playbook of cowards who can't fight head on. They twist, they manipulate, they warp reality. But once you learn the tricks, you laugh. Because what looked like a blade is nothing more than a plastic toy. Gaslighting is the first weapon. It's not just lying, it's rewriting your memory while you're still alive. They'll tell you what you saw didn't happen. They'll tell you your feelings are wrong. They'll convince you that your reality is defective. And here's the real mindfuck. If you doubt yourself for too long, you'll hand them the keys to your sanity. That's the goal. Break your perception and they own your mind. But listen closely. Gaslighting only works if you argue, if you waste breath trying to prove yourself, if you beg them to acknowledge the truth. When you stop doing that, the magic dies. You don't fight delusion with facts. You kill it with indifference. Then comes guilt. Oh, they love guilt. It's their leash, their chain, their little whip across your back. They'll remind you of the times you slipped, the times you failed, the times you weren't perfect. And they'll dangle forgiveness like a prize, but only if you bow your head low enough. This isn't morality. This isn't justice. It's extortion. They turn your empathy against you, make you punish yourself for sins you never committed. But guilt only works if you accept the premise. The moment you look at them and say, "I owe you nothing," the leash snaps. And when the leash snaps, they panic. Now, let's talk about the games. Triangulation. They'll bring in third parties to shake your balance. He agrees with me. She thinks you're crazy too. They recruit others to strengthen their illusion. But it's always the same circus trick, a desperate clown pulling more clowns into the ring. And if you've got eyes to see, you'll notice the pattern. They need an audience. Without the crowd, the show dies. So don't play the audience. Walk out. Let them juggle alone. But here's something new most people don't notice. Every trick they use is a confession. Gaslighting means they're terrified of your memory. Guilt tripping means they're terrified of your independence. Triangulation means they're terrified of being seen for what they are. Their games aren't weapons. They're signals. Red flags waving in your face saying, this person is weak. This person is insecure. This person is afraid. You don't see an enemy anymore. You see a patient, a case study, a textbook example of fragility disguised as dominance. Want another twist? These tactics don't come from strength. They come from laziness. Real strength builds. Real strength creates. Real strength faces truth. But gaslighting? That's the shortcut of liars who can't compete. Guilt tripping? That's the trick of parasites who can't carry their own weight. Triangulation? That's the move of cowards who can't stand alone. Every tactic screams weakness. Every trick exposes their lack of spine. And once you understand that, you don't feel anger anymore. You feel pity. Dangerous pity, because pity is colder than hate. Hate means they still matter. Pity means they're irrelevant. Now, let me sharpen the knife further. These games aren't personal. They'd play them on anyone. That's the biggest insult of all. You thought the war was about you? No. You're just another victim in their routine. They gaslight everyone. They guilt trip everyone. They triangulate everyone. You're not special to them. You're just the next puppet in line. That's the education most people miss. Their cruelty isn't proof of your flaws. It's proof of their emptiness. So, how do you win? Not by fighting harder. Not by shouting louder. Not by proving yourself. You win by refusing to sit at their table. When they flip the board, you don't pick up the pieces. You walk away from the game. You starve them. You make them irrelevant. You show them what silence tastes like, and it burns their throat worse than any insult you could throw back. And here's the joker's punchline. Once you see the trick, you can never unsee it. They'll try the same moves again. Gaslight, guilt, triangulate. You'll watch them like a bad rerun of a show you've already memorized. And instead of feeling pain, you'll laugh. Because once the curtain drops, the magic is gone. Once the mask slips, the clown is just a man with paint on his face. Think about that. The next time someone twists your words, the next time someone makes you question your sanity, the next time someone drags a third party into your fight, don't defend, don't explain, don't argue. Just smile. Let them spin their little tricks until they choke on their own performance. Because you know the truth now. You know the game. And when you know the game, you own the board. Their gaslight is a flickering bulb. Their guilt is a broken chain. Their triangulation is a circus no one respects. They thought they were clever. They thought they were in control. But every trick was just a signal of desperation. And you turned the performance into comedy. You took their weapons and you made them toys. You walked away untouchable. That's how you win. That's how you flip the power, not by playing harder, but by refusing to play at all. And in that refusal, their master plan backfires. The narcissist, the puppet, the clown, exposed for what he always was. Weak, desperate, forgettable. Well, well, well. Isn't it fascinating how quickly the mask begins to crack when you say nothing? That's the part they never expect. They build their entire illusion on noise, on reaction, on pulling your strings until you dance. But you cut the strings, and suddenly the puppet show collapses. They hate silence more than truth, because silence doesn't give them anything to twist. Silence is a mirror, and narcissists can't stand mirrors. They survive by convincing the world they are flawless, superior, untouchable. But that mask is thin, fragile, paper glued together by your validation. Without it, the cracks start spreading. The beauty of silence is that it doesn't argue. It doesn't try to prove innocence. It doesn't fight in their circus. It just sits there, cold and still, forcing them to fill the air. And every word they speak while you say nothing is another piece of their mask falling to the floor. Watch closely. At first they'll smirk. They'll laugh, thinking you're weak, thinking you got no comeback. But wait, that smirk starts twitching. That laugh sounds forced. Their tone rises, their words multiply, their confidence begins to leak. Why? Because they need your resistance to look powerful. Without your pushback, they're performing for an empty theater. And no performer survives when the crowd leaves. You don't expose them by shouting louder. You expose them by refusing to clap. You expose them by letting their contradictions pile up. Because narcissists talk themselves into corners. They weave stories so tangled that eventually they strangle themselves with their own lies. Your silence is the rope. Your indifference is the knot. And the longer you hold, the faster they tighten it. The mask isn't real power. It's costume jewelry, shiny from a distance, worthless up close. They project strength, but inside they're hollow. They project certainty, but inside they're insecure. And the silence forces them to face that. They can't handle it. That's why they lash out harder. That's why their voice shakes when yours doesn't. The world around you starts noticing too. Because people may be fooled for a moment, but not forever. The narcissist needs a stage, an audience, applause. Without it, they get sloppy. They start exposing their own desperation. They start making mistakes. They show anger too fast, jealousy too obvious, cruelty too sharp. And those watching begin to whisper, wait, maybe the mask isn't real. That's the backfire. They set out to humiliate you. They tried to paint you as weak, as crazy, as broken. But your silence turned the spotlight around. Suddenly, it's not you under the light, it's them. Suddenly, the questions aren't about you anymore. They're about the cracks in their act. They lose credibility without you lifting a finger. The trick isn't in defending yourself. The trick is in refusing to defend. Because defense acknowledges the accusation. Indifference kills it. Narcissists thrive on chaos. But silence is order. Silence is discipline. Silence is war disguised as peace. And nothing drives them closer to collapse and realizing they can't touch you anymore. This is where your strength sharpens. Most people panic in silence. Most people fill the gaps with excuses, with explanations, with weak attempts to prove their worth. But you've trained yourself to sit still. You've trained yourself to let discomfort burn without moving. That's what makes you untouchable. Because they'll go insane trying to get a reaction, while you sit there like stone. Think about the predator in the wild. It chases, it claws, it hunts because the prey runs. But what happens when the prey doesn't move? What happens when it refuses to play the role? The predator looks confused, desperate, exposed. That's what you've done to them. You've rewritten the script. They thought you'd dance, beg, scream. You gave them nothing. And nothing is their worst nightmare. Your silence reveals the truth they've hidden even from themselves. They are ordinary. That's the dagger. For someone who lives off illusions of superiority, being seen as ordinary is death. They'll fight it with every word, every performance, every fake smile. But deep down, they know you've seen behind the curtain. You've seen the fragility. You've seen the cracks. You've seen the mask slip. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. That's the real victory. Because even if they gather new crowds, even if they wear new masks, you know what lies underneath. You carry that knowledge like a weapon, and it changes the way you move. You no longer fear their games because you've already witnessed the collapse. The silence teaches you a dangerous lesson. Exposure doesn't come from fighting harder. Exposure comes from standing still long enough to let the truth speak for itself. Narcissists expose themselves when you stop trying to prove them wrong. They unravel because the performance can't run forever. Eventually, the actor forgets his lines. Eventually, the mask slips. And when it does, you don't need revenge. You don't need applause. You don't need validation, because the backfire has already happened. They've burned their own image without your help. They've destroyed their own credibility while you remained untouched. That's the joke, the punchline, the irony. They tried to make you look weak, but in the end, all they revealed was their own fragility. So stay quiet, stay dangerous, stay untouchable. Don't flinch, don't react, don't explain. Let the silence strip them bare. Let the cracks widen until the mask shatters. And when it does, don't even celebrate. Just walk away. Because the loudest humiliation isn't being exposed by someone else, it's exposing yourself while the world watches in silence. You don't need to lift a weapon, you don't need to fire a shot. The mask slips on its own when you refuse to play. And when it does, everyone sees what you always knew. The predator was just a clown, and the god was just a man. Isn't it funny? Every insult they throw at you, every accusation, every poisonous little jab, it was never about you. It was always about them. That's the secret nobody tells you. The narcissist screams loudest about the things rotting inside their own chest. They don't point at you because you're guilty. They point at you because they're drowning. Projection is confession, and they confess more than a drunk priest at midnight. When they call you weak, it's because they know they are. When they label you selfish, it's because they can't breathe without using someone. When they accuse you of lies, it's because truth has never lived comfortably in their own mouth. They don't attack what you are, they attack what they're terrified of being exposed as. And you've been wasting your breath defending yourself against shadows that were never yours to carry. Think back. Every time you tried to reason, to explain, to say, "No, you don't understand, that's not me," what happened? They smiled. They twisted. They escalated because you missed the trick. The moment you defend, you legitimize their illusion. You give weight to a lie that can't stand on its own. But when you stand there, unmoved, smirking like the Joker in a courtroom of clowns, their mask cracks, because suddenly the accusation isn't your problem anymore. It's their confession echoing back in their own ears. That's the beauty of projection. It's sloppy. It's loud. It's uncontainable. A narcissist can only project for so long before the crowd realizes the movie they're playing is their own biography. Watch carefully. When they accuse you of cheating, it's because they can't keep their own hands clean. When they rant about loyalty, it's because they've betrayed everyone within reach. When they point their finger at you, look at their hands. They're already covered in the blood of their own failures. You want to destroy a narcissist? Don't fight them. Don't argue. Don't even lift a finger. Just let them talk. Give them the microphone. Give them the stage. Give them all the attention they crave. Because the more they talk, the more they reveal. They can't help it. Their obsession with projection is a disease. Every word is a symptom. Every insult a diagnosis. And you're the doctor sitting back, letting the patient write their own chart. Here's the cold truth. People reveal themselves in the way they judge others. A man obsessed with calling everyone a liar, he's the fraud. A woman constantly shrieking about betrayal, she's the one stabbing backs in the dark. A so-called leader always whining about disloyalty, he's the one who abandons first. That's how you flip the game. You stop taking words as gospel and start reading them as confessions. Suddenly, the attacks become a map of their sins. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. This is where most people break. They think silence is weakness. But silence is the sharpest blade in the drawer. The narcissist projects because they're desperate for you to scream back, to drown out the sound of their own confession. If you stay quiet, they panic. They start screaming louder, pointing harder, accusing more. And the more they scramble, the more obvious it becomes to everyone else. They're not exposing you, they're exposing themselves. That's the backfire. That's the collapse. That's when their master plan turns into a circus act they can't escape. And let me tell you, nothing eats a narcissist alive faster than their own words. They are trapped in the echo chamber of their projection. They scream, "You're weak," into the void, and all they hear back is their own trembling voice. They yell, "You're a liar," and taste the bitterness of every false promise they've made. They rant, "You're unworthy," and choke on the reflection in the mirror. That's why they can never sit in silence. Silence is a mirror, and projection is just them punching their own reflection. You think I'm exaggerating? Look around. The greatest liars always accuse the world of dishonesty. The most corrupt scream about fairness. The most insecure mock others' confidence. It's the oldest trick in the book. Hide your sins by tattooing them onto someone else's skin. But tattoos fade, and truth bleeds through no matter how much ink you pour over it. So what's your play? Stop defending, stop arguing, stop handing them the fuel they crave. Instead, flip the script. Treat every insult like evidence, every attack like testimony, every accusation like a diary entry they accidentally read out loud. Watch the way the crowd shifts when you don't fight back. Watch how the air changes when you smirk instead of stutter. Watch how fast the predator turns into prey when his words boomerang back to his own chest. You don't need revenge. You don't need exposure. You don't need to build a case. They're their own prosecutor, their own witness, their own executioner. Every projection is a confession stamped in bold ink. You just stand there, calm, dangerous, untouchable, letting them choke on the script they wrote for themselves. And here's the killer ending. Projection never stops. It's not a one-time trick, it's a pattern. Which means you don't just win once, you win every time. Because every fresh insult is another confession. Every new attack is another crack in their mask. Every desperate projection is another shovel digging their own grave. So laugh. Laugh when they accuse. Laugh when they twist. Laugh when they think they've landed the final blow. Because you know the truth. Their insults aren't daggers, they're mirrors. And every time they open their mouth, they carve another scar on their own reflection. Projection is confession, and the confession is loud. They didn't expose you, they exposed themselves. Isn't this the favorite trick in their pathetic playbook? Triangulation. The oldest, laziest circus act in the narcissist's arsenal. They can't confront you directly, so they drag a third person into the arena, spin lies, and hope you bleed out fighting ghosts. It's a stage act for the insecure. Look, everyone, I'm the hero, and my target is the villain. But here's the dirty secret. The only one who looks desperate in this circus is the clown running the show. Triangulation is the illusion of power. It's their way of saying, I can't beat you one-on-one, so let me call in backup. Let me twist someone else against you. Let me make you feel cornered. They whisper poison in someone else's ear and then sit back grinning, waiting for chaos. They live for the drama. They need that triangle to survive. Without it, they're just a small, scared person talking to themselves in the dock. But you don't play the triangle. You don't chase explanations. You don't fight shadows. That's what separates you. Because here's the backfire they never calculated. The third person they recruited becomes their witness, their mirror, the one who sees the lies firsthand. Every fake tear, every exaggerated victim story, every slanderous word, it all exposes them faster than silence ever could. The narcissist doesn't realize that every person they triangulate is another crack in their mask. See, when they pull someone else in, they're actually admitting defeat. They're saying, I can't handle you directly. I need allies. I need props. I need an audience. The predator begging for a crowd is no predator at all. That's weakness dressed up in arrogance. That's fear hiding behind numbers. And when you don't react, when you don't scramble to defend yourself, the whole act collapses. The third party eventually wonders, if you're so guilty, why aren't you even flinching? If you're so evil, why do you stay so calm? And then the suspicion shifts. The beauty of triangulation is how fragile it is. It requires constant maintenance. They have to feed the lies. They have to twist the narrative daily. They have to keep the audience entertained, and no one can juggle forever. Eventually, the lies contradict. Eventually, the mask slips. Eventually, the flying monkeys turn into silent judges, staring at the narcissist, wondering why the performance never ends. Let's get real. A strong man doesn't triangulate. A strong man looks you in the eye and speaks his truth. Only the weak run sideways, hiding behind others. And once you see it for what it is, it's laughable. It's not a chess game. It's not a war. It's a carnival act, a juggling routine, a sideshow meant to distract you from noticing how empty they really are. You don't need to clear your name. You don't need to chase down rumors. You don't need to win back the crowd. Because the truth about triangulation is this: it always burns the one who starts it. They recruit people by playing the victim, but sooner or later, they run out of energy to keep the mask on. Victims don't constantly need to sell their story. Liars do. And when people see that hustle, when they feel that desperation, the sympathy drains. The audience leaves. The circus tent collapses. What makes you untouchable in this scenario is your refusal to play. You don't rush to explain yourself. You don't run around defending against lies. You let them perform. You let them overplay. You let them dig their own grave with every exaggerated accusation. Because the more they spin, the more obvious it becomes that they're desperate to convince. And desperation is always ugly. The narcissist thinks triangulation isolates you. In reality, it isolates them. Because while they're busy pointing fingers, you're busy building. While they're gathering gossip, you're gathering strength. While they're chasing alliances, you're sharpening your silence. And silence is lethal. Silence makes people wonder. Silence turns their performance into noise. You know why triangulation fails in the long run? Because healthy people notice patterns. The third person eventually realizes they're being used as a pawn. Nobody enjoys being dragged into someone else's endless drama. At first, they may listen. At first, they may nod. But when the narcissist never stops whining, when the same story repeats with new villains every week, the third party wakes up. They see the common denominator. And spoiler alert, it's not you. Triangulation isn't power, it's exposure. Every attempt to smear you creates another witness to their madness. Every desperate attempt to control the narrative only reveals how much control they've already lost. And when you remain still, calm, detached, the contrast between you and them becomes undeniable. You're the quiet presence. They're the screaming chaos. Which one do you think the world trusts more? They wanted you humiliated. Instead, they made themselves ridiculous. They wanted you cornered. Instead, they trapped themselves in their own lies. They wanted you to fight shadows. Instead, you walked away and left them swinging in air. And when the dust settles, when the circus tent burns down, the only thing left standing is you. Untouched, unbothered, undefeated. So let them triangulate. Let them gather flying monkeys. Let them put on the mask and scream your name. Because every time they do, they carve their own downfall deeper. Every time they drag someone else in, they hand out more proof of who they really are. Every time they try to humiliate you, the spotlight shifts back to their pathetic performance. That's the ultimate backfire of triangulation. They thought they could bury you with rumors, but they only buried themselves in contradictions. They thought they could isolate you, but they only exposed their dependency on allies. They thought they could make you the villain, but the more they talked, the clearer it became that they were the real showpiece. In the end, you don't even have to lift a finger. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You don't need to explain, because the greatest punishment for a narcissist is exposure, and triangulation is the rope they tie around their own neck. So sit back, watch the circus, let the clown juggle until he drops. Don't clap, don't boo, don't even acknowledge the performance, because the silence of the audience is the loudest humiliation of all. And when the curtain finally falls, you'll still be standing in the shadows, untouchable, while the narcissist drowns in the echo of their own failure. That's not survival. That's domination. That's the art of watching the predator become the punchline. They thought control was theirs forever. They thought if they pressed the right button, pulled the right string, you'd dance like a puppet in their circus. That's what narcissists believe, that your emotions are their property, that your reactions belong to them. But here's the punchline. The whole act collapses the moment you stop flinching. A narcissist feeds on response. Rage, defense, tears, even explanations. It's all fuel. The angrier you get, the stronger they feel. The more you justify, the taller they stand. Every second you waste reacting is another drop of blood they sip like wine. But here's the trick. Stop reacting and they starve. Your silence isn't empty. It's suffocating. They need you to scream so they can play calm. They need you to panic so they can act superior. But when you stare straight into the storm without blinking, the storm loses its power. Think about it. Why do they provoke? To see the crack in your armor, to hear the break in your voice, to watch you scramble for approval. Every insult is bait. Every accusation is a hook. Every guilt trip is a chain. But none of it works if you don't bite. Let the hook dangle. Let the bait rot. Let the chains fall useless to the ground. That's when they realize their control was never real. It was borrowed. Borrowed from your reactions. Borrowed from your weakness. Borrowed from the false idea that you needed them. Most people break because they fear silence. They can't stand being misunderstood, so they explain. They can't stand being insulted, so they defend. They can't stand being accused, so they fight back. That's how the narcissist wins, by turning your fear into free labor. They say one lie, and you write essays to prove yourself. They whisper one insult, and you tear your soul apart to fix it. They hint at betrayal, and you spiral for days, and all the while they sit calm, laughing in the corner. But once you stop flinching, once you stop giving them proof that they matter, you flip the game upside down. Control is an illusion, and illusions only work when you participate. You stop clapping, the magician looks like a clown. You stop reacting, the narcissist looks like a child throwing tantrums in an empty room. That's when they get sloppy. That's when the mask slips. They push harder, but you don't move. They scream louder, but you don't answer. They accuse, guilt, twist, and still nothing. No flinch, no fuel, no supply. You've turned their superpower into their biggest weakness. It's almost funny, isn't it? How fragile they really are. They strut around like kings, but the moment you stop feeding them, they collapse like junkies without a fix. Control isn't power. Control is dependency in disguise. Because if they really had power, they wouldn't need your reaction at all. But they do. They always do. That's the secret no one tells you. Narcissists can't live without prey. Without you, they starve. Without you, they crumble. Without you, their power dissolves into dust. So don't defend. Don't explain. Don't try to win arguments that were rigged before they began. You win by not playing. You win by being untouchable. You win by standing so calm they start shaking at the sight of you. That's the real reversal. When your composure becomes their chaos, when your silence becomes their screaming, when your indifference becomes their breakdown. They thought control was theirs, but no, it was yours all along. Watch closely when you stop flinching. Watch how the cracks spread. They'll talk faster, trying to fill the silence. They'll push harder, trying to get a rise. They'll scramble, accuse, even play victim, anything to make you react. And still you sit there, unmoved, almost bored. That's the moment the predator realizes he's the prey, because the one who can't control himself is always the weakest in the room. And here's the final twist. When you stop reacting, you don't just protect yourself, you expose them to everyone. Their mask only works when you play the role they need. Without your panic, their performance looks pathetic. The room sees it. The audience notices. What once looked like power now looks like desperation. What once looked like control now looks like madness. They're not gods. They're not monsters. They're clowns in costumes begging for applause. You've taken back the one thing they can't survive without: your energy. They'll hate you for it. They'll call you cold, arrogant, heartless. Good. Let them. Because every insult they throw is just another confession of weakness. They can't break you, so they smear you. They can't control you, so they demonize you. But none of it matters because you don't flinch. You don't move. You don't give them the satisfaction of knowing they still matter. This is how control really dies. Not in fights, not in screams, not in explanations. Control dies in silence. Control dies in calm. Control dies when you stop needing to prove yourself. Because the moment you don't care, they lose everything. So stand still, stay silent, stare into their chaos like it's a joke. Because that's exactly what it is. Their control isn't real. Their power isn't real. The only thing real is your refusal to flinch. And when you master that, you've mastered them. Isn't it funny? They thought they could corner you, paint you as the villain, use their shiny little puppet to drag your name into the mud. They thought they had the perfect weapon. A narcissist who feeds on drama, who thrives on attention, who dances whenever someone snaps their fingers. But here's the joke. When the mask cracks, it always cracks in public. And when it does, the show they built for your destruction becomes their own humiliation. Think about it. The narcissist survives by performance. They walk around with painted faces, acting flawless, acting untouchable, acting as if their lies were oxygen and the world was stupid enough to breathe them in. And people clap at first. Oh, how they clap. But you? You didn't clap, you didn't argue, you didn't scream. You just stood there, calm, still, silent. And that silence was gasoline poured over their performance. They had to talk louder, they had to twist harder, they had to keep spinning webs. And the more they spun, the more the audience began to notice the holes. See? That's the trick nobody teaches you. You don't have to prove them wrong. You don't have to chase every lie. You just let them drown in their own noise. Because liars always talk too much. Manipulators always overreach. Narcissists can't resist the spotlight. And when you give them enough rope, they don't just hang themselves. They set the stage on fire while they're at it. That's what happened. Their so-called master plan began as a circus. They paraded their puppet around, shouting accusations, twisting stories, mocking you. They thought the world would laugh at you. But the punchline flipped. Because when you refused to fight, when you refused to play their little script, the spotlight shifted. And suddenly, it wasn't you on trial. It was them. The mask slipped, the cracks showed, the narcissist performance turned into a meltdown. The backfire is always public. It's never quiet. They spend so much energy trying to humiliate you that they forget to cover their own lies. They forget consistency. They forget logic. And little by little, people start whispering, "Wait, that doesn't add up. Something feels off. Why are they always so obsessed? Why are they trying so hard?" And the whispers grow. The same crowd they wanted as an army becomes a jury. You see, exposure doesn't happen in private. It happens when the narcissists can't help themselves. They're addicted to performance. They need an audience. And when they finally collapse under the weight of their own contradictions, everyone sees it. Everyone remembers it. And nothing they do can erase it. That's the moment you win without lifting a finger. That's the moment the joke lands. Because the plan wasn't to destroy you. The plan ended up destroying themselves. Their puppet wasn't a weapon. Their puppet was a clown. Their puppet was a ticking bomb. And you were the one who let it tick long enough to explode. Do you realize the power in that? Do you understand how rare it is? Most people panic when attacked. Most people scramble to defend themselves. Most people waste energy trying to explain. Not you. You gave them nothing. And because you gave them nothing, they exposed everything. The public backfire is always louder than the private betrayal. That's why it stings them more. They didn't just lose control, they lost their image. They didn't just lose you, they lost the crowd. And once a narcissist loses the crowd, they're finished. They can scream all they want, but the mask is gone. The audience has seen the truth, and there's no going back. The beauty of it all, you didn't even have to touch them. You didn't have to defend yourself. You didn't have to stoop to their level. You let time do the heavy lifting. You let their addiction to attention eat them alive. You let them crash under their own lies. And now, the plan is ashes, and the ashes are all over their hands. That's why I laugh. That's why it's so sweet. They built the stage, they paid for the show, they gathered the crowd, and they handed the microphone to a narcissist thinking it was a weapon. And what happened? The puppet turned on them. The puppet's cracks showed in front of everyone. The puppet they unleashed became the joke of the century. This isn't about karma. This isn't about fate. This is psychology. This is the inevitable result of letting a fraud run the show. They always overplay their hand. They always dig too deep. And they always collapse in the same place they tried to shine the brightest. The backfire isn't accidental. It's destiny. And here's what you learn from it. You never need to chase revenge. Revenge is impatient. Revenge makes you sloppy. All you need is discipline. All you need is silence. All you need is the patience to let people reveal themselves, because they always do. Every narcissist collapses. Every manipulator cracks. Every fake burns out. The difference is whether you were smart enough to stay out of the fire while they lit themselves up. So now, when the smoke clears, what's left? You. Untouched, calm, still standing. While they scrambled to explain why their weapon turned into a liability, while they scrambled to rebuild their mask, while they scrambled to control the damage, but it's too late. Once the crowd sees the truth, the illusion is gone forever, and that's the real death for a narcissist. The loss of image, the loss of audience, the loss of control. Their master plan backfired in their faces. They wanted to humiliate you, but all they did was expose themselves. They wanted to break you, but all they did was prove you couldn't be broken. They wanted to build a circus, but all they built was their own funeral stage. And you didn't lift a finger. The final laugh belongs to you. Not because you destroyed them, but because you survived them. Not because you fought harder, but because you refused to fight at all. You let them implode. You let them reveal what they really were. And now the crowd sees it too. That's the art of the backfire. That's the real joke. They thought you needed them. That was their biggest mistake. They built their entire master plan on the illusion that you couldn't breathe without their attention, their validation, their crumbs of recognition. But what happens when the leash they're holding isn't attached to your neck anymore? What happens when you rip it off, laugh in their faces, and keep walking? I'll tell you what happens. The entire game collapses. The narcissist survives on dependency. They feed on the belief that you need their approval. They thrive on the idea that you'll crawl back, begging, explaining, defending. They use control like a drug, and they're the dealer. But what happens when the customer quits cold turkey? The dealer starves. That's when the empire of manipulation turns into a circus act with no audience. The joke here is simple. They never had power over you. They only had power over the part of you that still craved something from them. When you kill that craving, you kill their illusion. And suddenly the narcissist isn't a god. They're just a desperate clown juggling masks in front of an empty crowd. That's why the art of needing nothing is the final blow. Needing nothing doesn't mean you become empty. It means you're full. So full that nothing outside of you decides who you are anymore. You're not starving for validation. You're not chasing scraps of attention. You're not molding yourself to be liked. You are done. And when you're done, you're free. The narcissist can't compete with that, because their entire existence depends on chasing what you've already buried. You want to know the most terrifying thing for a manipulator? A target that doesn't react. A victim that doesn't flinch. A person who doesn't need them at all. Imagine a predator who walks into the hunt and realizes the prey is gone. No chase, no panic, just silence. That silence becomes the predator's prison, because now they're left alone with themselves. And that's the one person they can't stand. When you need nothing, you can't be baited. You can't be guilt-tripped. You can't be bribed with cheap apologies or fake promises. They'll say, "You'll regret this." You won't. They'll say, "You'll never find better. You already have yourself." They'll say, "You can't survive without me." And you'll smile because you've already proved you can survive without anyone. That's the nightmare they never prepared for. The moment you stop being a pawn in their game and become the dealer of your own destiny. The irony is this: they'll accuse you of being selfish when you stop needing them. They'll call you cold, arrogant, detached. But that's projection again. It's not that you become heartless, it's that you stopped being harvestable. They can't feed on you anymore. And when a parasite can't feed, it dies. That's not your cruelty. That's just biology. So you sit there calm while they unravel. You don't defend yourself. You don't explain. You don't announce your independence. You simply stop playing. And the silence is deafening to them. It's like taking oxygen away from someone who's drowning. They panic, they lash out, they scream, and the louder they get, the clearer it is to everyone else that the power has shifted. Do you see it now? Power isn't about control. It's about freedom, real freedom. The freedom that comes from not needing a damn thing from anyone who ever tried to use you. When you need nothing, you can walk away from anything. A toxic friend, a lying lover, a fake ally, a corrupt system. You're not tied down. You're untouchable. They'll try to bait you back. They'll throw rumors, smear campaigns, fake stories. They'll beg for your reaction. But here's the final trick. You don't give them one. You become too disciplined. You become too aware. You become too free. And the more they throw at you, the more they expose themselves. Because the only one swinging now is them. You're already gone. That's how you win. Not by shouting louder. Not by proving you were right. Not by getting revenge in the way they expect. You win by not needing what they tried to dangle in front of you like bait. You win by making their existence irrelevant. You win by walking away so completely that they become a bad memory, a ghost story, a warning to never let anyone rent space in your soul again. The narcissist loses when you need nothing. The smear campaign dies. The games die. The control dies. And here's the punchline. Their master plan backfires because the weapon they chose to use against you destroyed itself. They wanted to trap you, but they only exposed their own emptiness. And you walked out stronger, colder, freer than they ever imagined. Needing nothing is the highest power you can hold. Because everything they wanted to use against you, every trick, every trap, every guilt trip, none of it works anymore. You've closed every door they could enter. You've welded every lock. You burned the bridge and watched the smoke with a smile. Now they sit in their own chaos, choking on their own lies, drowning in their own desperation. And you walk away. No fanfare, no applause, no need for anyone to clap. Because when you win by needing nothing, you don't need the world to notice. You already know. That's the Joker's laugh echoing in the distance. The laugh of someone who figured out the final trick. The laugh of someone untouchable. The laugh of someone who doesn't need a damn thing from anyone who ever tried to destroy them. And once you reach that point, once you've mastered the art of needing nothing, the war is already over. You win by needing nothing. And that's exactly why they've lost everything. Well. The grand finale, the curtain call. The moment when the mask rips apart and the predator, the monster, the narcissist they threw at you to destroy you reveals itself for what it always was, a joke. Not a god, not a killer, not some unbeatable machine, just a desperate little actor who spent too long believing his own script. They wanted to humiliate you. They wanted to see you crawl, explain yourself, beg for respect that should have been yours all along. They thought the narcissist was the perfect weapon. A snake with fangs sharp enough to poison your name, twist your reality, and leave you broken. But here's the truth. You can only poison someone who drinks. You refuse the glass. You refuse to react. You refuse to give them what they crave most, your attention. And that's when the entire show started to fall apart. A narcissist can only thrive in an audience. Their mask only shines when people clap. But you stopped clapping. You didn't boo. You didn't fight. You didn't defend. You just sat there smiling, silent, watching the show collapse under its own weight. And then the so-called predator realized the nightmare. Without your participation, without your energy, he was nothing. Just a clown begging for laughs in an empty theater. You see, that's the beauty of psychological warfare. They expected chaos. They expected noise. But silence is torture to the narcissist. Silence is the blade that cuts deeper than words. Every day you ignored them, their power bled out. Every time you refused to answer, they unraveled. Every second you refused to feed their hunger, the audience saw their desperation. And once the audience sees desperation, the game is over. They tried to smear you, didn't they? Lies, gossip, accusations, all sprayed out like bullets from a broken gun. But here's the fun part. A narcissist always overplays. Always. They push too far. They twist too much. They exaggerate until the lies trip over themselves. And suddenly the people who once believed start whispering, wait, maybe the mask isn't real. Maybe the predator is a fraud. And that's when the laughter begins. Not yours, not theirs, the world's. Projection is confession. Remember that. Every insult they threw at you, selfish, manipulative, cruel, was just a mirror of their own sickness. They weren't describing you. They were confessing themselves. And while they thought they were burying your reputation, they were digging their own grave. Because eventually, everyone connects the dots. Everyone sees the pattern. Everyone realizes that the predator was nothing but a broken man screaming his reflection at the crowd. The backfire wasn't quiet. Oh no, it was loud. It was public. It was humiliating. Because you didn't need revenge. You didn't need to fight back. You just let time do the work. Time always exposes frauds. And now the narcissist isn't feared. He's not respected. He's mocked. He's laughed at. The very weapon they tried to use against you became the punchline of their entire plan. That's the kind of ending you don't plan. It just happens when truth sits patiently and lets lies self-destruct. You want to know the secret? You won because you needed nothing. They needed chaos. They needed attention. They needed validation. You needed none of it. You built in silence. You moved in discipline. You walked away with calm eyes while they flailed for relevance. And that's why they lost. That's why they'll always lose. Because the one who needs nothing cannot be broken. Look at them now, exhausted, exposed, empty. Once paraded as the predator, now reduced to a child throwing tantrums nobody takes seriously. They're not gods. They're not monsters. They're not masterminds. They're fragile. They're hollow. They're laughable. And the people who unleash them? They're scrambling too because their master plan turned into their public humiliation. They wanted to watch you collapse, but instead the collapse happened in their own camp. That's the ultimate backfire. Not only did you survive, you came out sharper. Not only did their weapon fail, it destroyed them. You didn't just beat the narcissist, you erased the illusion of his power. You made him human. And there's nothing more humiliating for someone who pretends to be untouchable than being exposed as ordinary. This isn't just motivation, this is education. This is the psychology they don't want you to understand. Narcissists don't operate on strength. They operate on reactions. Cut the reaction, cut the fuel, cut the supply, and the beast suffocates. That's why this war was over before it started. That's why their weapon turned on them. That's why the predator became a punchline. So let them talk. Let them spin their lies. Let them choke on their own words. Because you already won the moment you decided their chaos didn't deserve your energy. You won the moment you realized you don't defend yourself to clowns. You won the moment you walked away untouchable. The lesson is simple. When they unleash a narcissist against you, don't fight, don't defend, don't explain. Watch, wait. Starve the monster. Let the mask slip. Let the truth burn through. Because it always does. And when it does, the predator isn't feared anymore. He's mocked, he's ridiculed. He's finished. They thought they were clever. They thought they had you cornered. They thought their master plan was genius. But in the end, it backfired so hard it burned their own hands. And you? You walked out without a scratch, silent, calm, dangerous. That's the art of power. That's the Joker's trick. Let them unleash the predator. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Then step aside and let them collapse in their own chaos. Because the predator isn't real. The god isn't real. The monster isn't real. They're all just masks, and masks always fall. You didn't just survive. You didn't just win. You made their weapon irrelevant. You made their predator a joke. You made their plan backfire in their faces. And when the dust settles, when the noise dies, when the crowd finally sees the truth, they'll all remember one thing. They unleashed a monster, but you turned him into nothing more than a punchline.